and welcome to a spin-off podcast from the Doctor Who show we call The List Makers, where we make some lists. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And this is episode 61, where our topic is top 5 prequels, the top 5 stories we'd like to see a prequel of to learn how we got to where we got when the story arrived.
Yeah, which can be taken a few ways, like what happened immediately before, like in the 10 minutes before or the day before, or it could be a longer term sort of thing, and I've pretty much gone with the latter in most of mine.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting because it is a very open to interpretation topic. So I'm going to be curious to see how we go in there. I think that it's possible that we get no snaps.
I think that's entirely possible.
If there's going to be one, I think it might be this one here I'm looking at. But because it's such a broad idea, there could be no snaps. Let's see. It's my turn to make my list first. As always, we'll each make our lists. We'll listen attentively, and then we'll compare notes.
Mm-hmm.
At number 5, I have got The Pyramids of Mars, because the story of Sutekh coming to power, his fight with Horus and the other 700 Osirians that eventually leads them to Egypt, and the capturing and the imprisonment of Sutekh, and the decision not to execute him but to put him in a pyramid controlled from Mars, I think would be fascinating. I think that it would be big, it would be a spectacle, it would be aliens in ancient Egypt, and that would just tickle so many of my fancies. So I'm going with a prequel to The Pyramids of Mars.
Okay.
Number 4, I'm coming all the way up to the Gatwa era.
Ooh.
Because I would like a prequel to Dot and Bubble. That is a society that is truly bizarre. It's bizarre in that it's all young people. It's bizarre in that they're all racists. It's bizarre in that they're all genuinely addicted to their social media bubbles. It's bizarre in what's going on in the homeworld where the parents are. How did this all come about? Where did those slug creatures come from? Is it a Golga Frinchen style idea where they've sent the useless third of their society off to another planet? There's so many questions I want there. Are they a planet of racists, or did they send their racists off there, or did the social media bubbles on this planet in isolation mean that they became racist and white supremacist? I don't know. And although I've got many highs and many lows, I'm still conflicted with Dot and Bubble as a story, and whether I like it or not, and whether it works or not.
Yeah.
I think getting to where we got before the Doctor arrived would be really interesting. So Dot and Bubble at number 4.
Great.
Number 3, I've got a bit of a cheat here, Rob, in that it's a prequel to arguably 3 stories, if not more. Probably, actually, no, 5, 6, 7. It's a prequel to the Silurians and the Sea Devils and Warriors of the Deep and the Hungry Earth and the War Between the Land, etc., etc., etc. The story of the Silurians and the Sea Devils, or Homo Reptilia as I know them from the New Adventures, or Homo Aqua as we know them from the War Between the Land and the Sea. Let's just call them the Silurians and the Sea Devils. I think the story of them seeing the moon approaching, putting their society into cryogenic sleep, is an actually really, really interesting one. I think this idea of a society facing potential extinction and how they deal with it, and then taking drastic actions, is really interesting. Did the entire society go down into shelters to be put into cryogenic sleep, or was it the elite 10% and the other 90% were left on the surface to die?
Yeah.
How were decisions made? How was it all done? What was happening with dinosaurs? And look, anything with dinosaurs is really cool to me. I think that would be a really fascinating prequel story. You get a taste of it in the DWM prelude to the new adventure Bloodheat, but I think I'd like more.
Nice.
Number 2, it's a prequel that we kind of had, courtesy of JMS in Babylon 5, and that is Frontier in Space. This is a story that actually has a prequel told within the fabric of the story, because the whole setup of how humanity met the Draconians and that misunderstanding that led to the war between humanity and the Draconians, that led to long battles, massive destruction, and then a peace, a détente, a wall in space, if you like. Let's go back to our alternate galaxies on the undiscovered country and talk about the wall in space and our metaphors there. I think that would be a really interesting story. I think that if you could take the society that Malcolm Hulke has set up in Frontier in Space, that is has all the trappings of a democracy, but whiffs of a little bit of fascism, totalitarianism. That's a really interesting society into which to put things, and we've got the Draconians as well. So yes, JMS gave us the Earth Minbari War, which was, he has said, inspired by the prequel concept, Two Frontier in Space. Let's see that in Doctor Who.
Yes.
Number 1, I have gone with The Face of Evil, or as I call it, The Day That God Went Mad, which is what Chris Boucher wanted to call it. This is an occasion where the Doctor has rocked up, tried to help out, done a phenomenally bad job of it, and that has resulted in decades, if not centuries, of destruction, death, chaos, reversion to savagery, all sorts of terrible, terrible consequences. And it would be fascinating to see that story told out. So this is my one prequel that has the Doctor actually rock up. I want to see his first interaction with Zoanon and the survey team on that planet. Terrence Dix gives us a small taste of it in the novelisation where he sets it during the events of Robot, where the Doctor post-regen just has to get away, and he goes off with the TARDIS, and because he's post-regen, he doesn't do a good job. Let's see that story, Rob. That's my list.
Very good list, Dave. Very strong. No snaps.
No snaps. Interesting. Okay, let's see what we've got.
Okay, in at number 5, I've got Kinder, because I love mentioning Kinder. And
we haven't had a Kinder from you for a little while. We're due for one.
Yeah, it's true, actually. Maybe not Kinder per se, but let's have an episode that does a really good deep dive into the Mara. Yeah. I know there's been mentions in the series at times. There's been short stories. I think there's an audio. But yeah, a really good adventure that delves into the Mara's backstory, back in time. I think there's something really interesting to be mined there. So that's my number 5.
Nice.
In at number 4, I've got Marco Polo. And this came to me when I was thinking about pure historicals, and particularly pure historicals that are now lost, but people would love to see. And I thought, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if you took one, and I'm using Marco Polo as an example here, but you can transpose this to others, where the Doctor meets a person before they met him as Hartnell. So he's trying not to reveal himself as the Doctor because he knows he still has to meet this person as the Doctor in the future. And maybe he has to rescue that person from some sort of calamity without letting on, knowing that he's about to show up as Hartnell. And in this way, we get to do a remake of sorts of one of the historicals. We get some of the flavour of that story, the look of that story, the sumptuousness of that story and the sets. Have a cutesy tie-in, maybe even having the Hartnell crew arriving and the Doctor's like, okay, got to run now, bye-bye, because Hartnell's off in the distance, all blurry and such. Done right, I think it could be very interesting and fun. Done wrong, it probably could be terrible, but that's my number 4.
Nice.
In at number 3, I've got State of Decay. A loose idea here, but I think going back into Gallifrey's history and doing something with the great vampires, especially as we have such CGI these days, would work really well. Rather than taking things like Omega and Sutekh, which don't really lend themselves to being made into huge CGI creations that everyone rolls their eyes at, let's go a rung or two down the ladder in the show's history to something which is conducive to doing in big CGI terms. No one's going to bat an eyelid at that. In fact, if you have bow ships taking on great vampires, people are going to say, Jesus Christ, this is amazing. To me, that's a no-brainer. So yeah. It's in at number 3 on the list.
That didn't go where I thought it would, and we'll talk about that, but keep going with your list, Rob.
Okay. In at number 2, I've got Terror of the Autons. And I think people would love to see a Master backstory. And yeah, I know we've got the kid with the drums in his head during the Tennant era. There's the novel The Dark Path that 99% of fans today would have never read. Yeah. I think this is fertile ground to do something really amazing. And when you think about it, it could be a contemporary story and all of the Master stuff is just flashbacks. It doesn't have to be a story where the Master crosses paths with the 16th Doctor or whoever the current Doctor is before they go on to harass the 3rd Doctor back in time. It could just be flashbacks, and I think that could be a really interesting thing.
Yeah, okay.
And in at number 1, I've got Revenge of the Cybermen. The whole backstory to this adventure is basically the Cyber Wars, which have happened, and the Cybermen have been reduced to nothing, essentially. So I think the logical thing to do is to go back and place a story in the Cyber Wars. It could be anything, but again, I think it's right for CGI in the same way a State of Decay prequel would be as well. Fleets of cyber ships, maybe we get into some massive cyber tombs, go the whole 9 yards. Like The Great Vampires, people wouldn't bat an eyelid at the show going to town on CGI for this. Unlike, again, making massive CGI fests out of things that don't need to be massive CGI fests, like Sutek and Omega. You know, just like we long to see the Clone Wars in Star Wars, let's see the Cyber Wars in Doctor Who. That's my list.
That's a strong list as well, Rob. Very different to mine, but really interesting. I had a number of runners-up as well. A lot of them are very sort of similar in tone and style. I had Full Circle, that first arrival of the Pterodonians on Alzarius and their massacre by the Marsh people, I guess. The Keys of Marinus, how does Marinus get to be this thing with the Vord and what's it all going on? How the Macra conquer the planet of the Macra in the Macra Terror, and the Web Planet.
Nice. Yeah.
But some interesting ideas that you had there, Rob. Now, I kind of, as I was looking through stories and looking for inspiration, I saw the historicals. I thought, well, you can't do a prequel to an historical because that's just history. And then what you've said is absolutely true. And now I'm going, hey, we could do a prequel to the Romans and have the Doctor meeting Augustus or Claudius and basically doing like Claudius. That would be really cool. And I've gone, let's do a sequel to the Mythmakers and have Odysseus on his trip home. How cool would that be? So, no, I think that was a really clever idea that didn't even occur to me.
Yeah, I was partly inspired by that because I'm pretty sure there is a Big Finish story where Colin is in the Reign of Terror. Not the Reign of Terror, the Doctor Who story, but he's back during the Reign of Terror in France. And it's like, yeah, I think doctors can show up at roughly the same time as other doctors. You just have to be careful with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, look, French history is full of good places the Doctor could go back and visit as a prequel to the Reign of Terror or the Massacre.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so no, very, very interesting. When you said State of Decay, I thought...
I was about to raise that.
Yeah, I thought, obvious, that's an obvious one. How did the Great Vampire meet the crew of the Hydrax and lure them and change them and inspire them into E-space and hide and set up that society? And I thought, that's a really good idea, Rob, well done. And then you've gone, no. I'm going back to the battle between the Great Vampires and the Time Lords.
Yes. Why not?
Yeah, and I thought, well... yes, that's an even better idea. Just imagining, bow ships and Rassilon and all of that stuff. Yeah, that would be very cool.
Yeah, I mean, why not? And again, two of my picks come back to this idea that you can do spectacle and big CGI in Doctor Who. It just needs to be the right topic. And people will not roll their eyes. In fact, they'll say it's great.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really good. And of course, an OG story, an origin story for the Martyr is a fascinating idea. There is a Big Finish that I did listen to some years ago now that tried to do that, and it was terrible. So I thought there was an audio. I've not heard it. Yeah, I've heard it, and it was terrible.
Right.
Like a lot of the Big Finishes that try to be prequels tend to be, actually, unfortunately. So yeah, I think we're absolutely ripe for that idea of what is the Mara? Where did it come from? How do you weave the mythology told in Snake Dance around that? I think would be very interesting.
Yeah, I thought so. And similar for me with the Master as well. That's a similar thing that I think people would love to see told. In my idea, it could just be in flashbacks. It doesn't have to be the main story that's happening at that moment. Yeah,
it's interesting. When you said that some of these ideas can be done well or done very badly, you're right. And I think that idea you had is the biggest example of that, because you could get a really fascinating, either told in the moment or told through flashback, story of the Master and the Doctor and their time at the Academy and their time as friends and becoming enemies, and how one goes off on one path and one goes off on another path. That could be a really interesting story. There's also the danger that you get Time Lord Academy 90210, and it's just really, really bad.
Yeah, but look, done right, and I don't trust the current production team to do it right. But in a fantasy world where you could cast a couple of young 20-something guys who look vaguely like Bill Hartnell and vaguely like Roger Delgado, and they're having some sort of competition at the the university or something.
Yeah.
Possibilities are endless there.
Yeah, I mean, if this is a fantasy world, you give that to Robert Holmes, don't you?
Well, but yeah, why not?
Yeah, like get him to tell, the origin, or Terrence Dicks, one or both of them, get them to write it together. Talking about the origins of, or more about the Time Lords, but in that, told through that story of two young friends who end up enemies.
Yeah. Now, you went in some different directions in your list, Dave.
Yes, and a lot of them, for me, were stories that actually are there in the actual story, or prequels that were there in the actual story. Pyramids of Mars is overtly based on this previous battle between Horus and Sutekh. The Silurians is predicated on a set of events that they talk about but we don't see. Frontier in Space is the same. The Face of Evil is the same. Don Bubble isn't overtly talked about, but clearly there must be some sort of origin story to this idea that there's a subcolony of bitchy racist social media obsessed teens. Like these are all things that are set up by the story. The Web Planet, one of my runners up. How does the animals actually take over Vortis, and how does it drive away all the Menoptera? How do the Vord come to power in the Keys of Marinus when the conscience machine is working, and what does the conscience machine look like when it's working? Is it this wonderful nirvana where no evil can happen on this planet, or is it this horrible fascist totalitarian society where everybody does what I say is good, not necessarily what is good? Like, that's, again, fascinating. Whereas you've probably been a little bit more inventive and creative than I have.
Well, look, I see huge potential, say, in the Silurian thing where you said, do they leave behind 90% of the people? I mean, we're often told, in these vague histories of the Silurians that there's loads of these bases under the earth all over the place. So ostensibly they took a lot. But if their race was reasonably large, surely they left some up there. Wouldn't that be a tragic sort of ending to a story? Who gets picked? Who doesn't? Why? How? Do couples get split up? Do families get split up? How does this work? Like, I can see huge drama in that.
Yeah, and even though the devastation wasn't quite as bad as they were predicting, clearly it was bad enough to wipe out their civilization.
Yes.
Or if in this universe there was that cataclysm and then the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs, one way or the other their society sort of goes. But presumably if nobody wakes them up, anybody left on the surface doesn't survive.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I think that would be a fascinating things to do with the Silurians. Did you like my Frontier in Space Babylon 5 one, Rob?
Oh, I always like references to Babylon 5.
I hope that if they did it, we somehow get Michael York to play one of the human captains.
Very cool. But honestly, I think your most creative one, for me, hearing them, was the Dot and Bubble one. Because there was just an era and a story I wasn't thinking of at all. But you're right. It's like, yeah, is this a Golga Frincham situation, or have they been warped by social media? I guess that's the easier way to explain it. Maybe that is the intent, that social media bad, kids, and all of that stuff. But it would be interesting to go back and see how did this actually happen? What is the world building here? Because we don't get it in that story.
No, we absolutely don't. And the slugs are just a device. We don't really understand what they're about either.
Yeah. And maybe the writer really didn't know themselves, but someone can come in, whether it's the writer or someone else, and make a backstory for it. I think that's always quite interesting.
No, I think it would be as well. We've enjoyed that one, I think we can both say.
Yes.
But time for our next list to be drawn out. And next month, Rob, we will be doing a topic from listener Steve F747, Top 5 Plot Twists.
Ooh, that's tantalising.
That is very tantalising, but we'll discuss it next month, because until then, I've been Dave.
And I've been Rob.
And we'll make those lists then.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.